I'm reading a book right now by a Methodist woman minister, Diana Butler Bass. It's called Grounded. It's really wonderful. It's a little thick and heavy to get through, but I love it. She has a subtitle. It says, Finding God in the World, a Spiritual Revolution. Finding God in the World, a Spiritual Revolution. She has a quote in this present chapter I've been reading. It's taken from a speech that Hillary Clinton was giving to women and politics. Now, if you don't like Hillary, get over it. Okay, I'm just I'm not asking you to like her, but just to hear this one passage because it's hidden in this text that she gave, and it was highly criticized by the right, and that's understandable. That's what people do, is criticize the opposite side. But it really is about something that even in the criticism, she was proving her point. She was speaking about empathy. And in this talk, this is what she says. Oh my God, did I lose my place? Is there a God that is just? Why does this happen, Lord? Here we go. Okay. She speaks about empathy, and she's talking about how we listen to one another. And she says empathy for one's enemies is a form of power. So this is the text of her speech. She says this. This is what we call smart power, using every possible tool and partner to advance peace and security, leaving no one on the sidelines, showing respect, even for one's enemies, trying to understand and, insofar as psychologically possible, empathize with their perspective and point of view, helping to define the problems, determine the solutions. That is what we believe in the 21st century will change the prospects for peace. She calls it smart power, empathizing. Empathizing is listening to another person. It's taking in their perspective, even though we may hate the person, even though we may be enemies or be on completely different sides of the issue. Empathizing is just being willing to listen and consider that perspective. My father was an incredibly outgoing man. He's been dead about 15 years, and people say to me, Father Perry, you're so outgoing. I consider myself shy. I really do. Compared to my father, oh my God, he would speak to anybody, anywhere, even people he was absolutely opposed to. He just was the most open. He loved people, loved to be in conversation with people. My dad will walk around the block every day and every night with our dog, Schultze. And he'd often go without his shirt on, a big man, without his shirt on, these shorts, and then tennis shoes and black socks. Now, in those days, I wear black socks with tennis shoes now, but that was not the custom. It was white socks. And I used to say, Dad, how embarrassing. Please change your socks. Oh, my God. But he didn't. He talked to everybody. He knew everybody on that block, around the block by name. He knew the name of the dog. I don't remember names. He knew everybody, and he knew about their lives. He listened. He engaged them. He was truly outstanding. I knew a few neighbors, and that was it. That's all I needed to know. Do I know my block? No, and I don't want to. And I'm not proud of that. I wish I did. I wish I knew every neighbor on our street. Because that's what brings a neighborhood together. The best neighborhoods are neighborhoods that do things like this. Once a year or twice, they block off the street and have a block party, a potluck. Everybody knows each other. Everyone knows the mother that's been abandoned and needs help. Everyone knows the kids that are not being cared for properly. They're always dirty and they're always hungry. Everybody knows the family that's struggling. Everybody knows everything, and they just are there for each other. It's a different kind of way of living. And if you ask me, in a world that's become overpopulated with more than 7 billion people, and in a world where the population is just burgeoning, and especially like in Los Angeles, and in a world that has become so technological, if I want right now, I can call somebody in Tanzania. Can you believe it? Hello, this is Father Perry from, and who's this in Tanzania I'm talking to? We're so connected and we're so disconnected at the same time. In this age, you go in a restaurant, I love it, but I hate it. I love to hate what I see. 4 people at a table, they're all on their phones talking to somebody else, they're not at the table. They're there and they're not there at the same time. This is dangerous stuff. This is separating us and polarizing ourselves. We can't listen to each other because we have different politics. It's an abomination right now, the Democrats and Republicans. They won't work on anything. It is sad. They're working for us, but they're really working against us. It's a difficult time. We have so much at our disposal to bring us together, and yet in so many ways we stay apart. And I think that Jesus nails it today. He nails it. So do all the scriptures. All 3 of the scriptures are about people or individuals who have become lost in some way or another. But in addition to that, in the gospel, there's a little bit more to it. The context is this. Jesus is once again doing what was considered out of place. He was at the house of and eating at the table with prostitutes, with tax collectors, with drug addicts of his day, with the people that were considered unclean. If you were a truly religious person, you wouldn't hang around. It would be like if all of our Eucharistic ministers and lectors are here at the Mass today, and then later on today we saw them at a bar with a bunch of prostitutes. We said, oh my God, they were just serving at the table of the Lord today, and look at them. But that's where Jesus hung out, with sinners. And he was highly criticized for it. Jesus was a spiritual leader, and so the scribes and Pharisees, who were the kind of the top spiritual people of the synagogue, they would say, oh my God, there he is again. Would you look at this? He's eating with tax collectors and prostitutes. Oh my God, how can he be a real spiritual leader? So Jesus was aware of them, always talking like this, so he addressed them. And here's the scene. They're criticizing him, so he says to them, the scribes and Pharisees, 3 parables. The first 2 are about losing and finding, but they're losing things, losing a sheep, a lamb, losing a coin. It's probably a wedding coin, they say. These 10 coins that were considered very, very emotionally important to a bride. But in any case, things were lost and things were found. And the person who both lost them and found them came back to the neighbors and said, come on, please rejoice. I found the thing that was lost. Now, I think, my feeling is that this was a setup. Jesus started easy, talking about losing things and possessions. Then he goes deeper. And the deeper was this story about a father who had 2 lost sons, 2 of them. The first one was lost because he was the baby of the family and a spoiled brat. I understand this because I was spoiled for 3 years and then my little brother, Gugu, came and took it all away from me. It's his birthday tomorrow. How appropriate. Tomorrow. And he was a spoiled brat and he really paid for it. Spoiling someone doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. And when parents spoil, I'm not a parent, but you should consider the damage that you do. You think it's cute, but that child gets deformed. A spoiled child feels enabled, thinks they have a right to things. And very often, they get the resentment of their brothers and sisters. I know that too. So here was this spoiled child. Now this is how spoiled he was. You're going to be my dad for a moment, okay? All right? And I'm the spoiled child. This is what he said and did. He goes up to his father and says, Dad, I'd like my inheritance. Could you give me my inheritance? What's wrong with this picture? He's alive! You don't get the inheritance till your dad kicks the bucket. And in the story it says the dad gave him his inheritance, cut his property in half and gave it to his son. Who didn't appreciate it? Goes to another country, spends it all with prostitutes, says the gospel, says the story, the parable of Jesus. And then when he's broke, he was lost. Oh, was he lost? And he got lost and lost all of his possessions, everything. He comes to his senses, that is, he is found, comes back to life. And he says this, What's going on? I'm working on a farm feeding pigs, for God's sake, a Jew feeding pigs, starving to death. So he says, I'll go to my dad and say, Dad, I blew it. I'm not worthy to be your son. Just let me work as a slave. Let me be a servant. That's what he does. He finds himself, comes back to his dad, and what is his dad? Like in the other two stories, he's overjoyed. Oh my God, my son is back safe and sound. He was dead. Now he's back alive. He was lost and now he's found, and he's just filled with joy. Throw a party. Take the fattened calf that's for the biggest feast of the year and use it for my son. Now the other brother also was lost, but a different lost. I think a more serious one, both more subtle and more hideous at the same time. That's me, that son. I'm number 5 of 6, but I was for 3 years gloriously babied. And then Gugu took it away from me. I love him now, but I didn't for years. And I was resentful. And resentment is a very special feeling. When you get hurt, it turns to anger, and then it often turns to hatred. And the more you feel it, resent is, in Spanish, resentimiento. It's to feel it again and again and again and again until it's a part of your bones. Resentment is really ugly, and it's hard to get rid of because it goes so deep. This older brother, he was resentful. This took years in the making, and I'll tell you what was the frosting on the cake. When his inheritance got put in half to give it to his brother who went and spent it all. He probably hated his brother. He probably wished he'd never come home and maybe even thought, oh, hopefully he died. And his brother reappears to his dismay, the older brother, and then he finds out there's a party and the fattened calf is being used for his brother. Ooh, his fury came to the surface. He wouldn't even go to the party. So his father, recognizing the older brother as truly lost in arrogance and hatred and resentment and a whole bunch of feelings and even anger toward daddy, who was going to give him everything. And he says, son, come in. Your brother was dead. He's come back to life. You've got to come and celebrate. He says, wait a minute. I've never disobeyed an order. I've done everything you've asked. I've worked hard for you. You've never even given me a kid goat to celebrate. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And I hate my brother more, and I'm not coming in. And the father pleads with him. He doesn't lecture him. He doesn't get mad. He just says, wait a minute, your brother was dead. He's come back to life. We got to rejoice. He was lost and he's found. Now, the interesting thing about this parable, he doesn't tell us what happens to the older brother. Did he lose his resentment? Did he forgive? I doubt it. Resentful people, that's very hard to do. So did he remain lost? Perhaps. But the hope of the story is that he could hear his father's love, he could get the father's point, and maybe find himself again and forgive. This gospel, it's a critical, crucial gospel story for us to hear. And Jesus, the great teacher, I think, gives it to us with the great hope that we who are lost, and we're all lost in some way or another, some lightly and some more seriously, that if we are lost, we might be found. That if we're dead, we might come back to life. You know, I've been a priest 43 years. I sit in that confessional every Thursday and Saturday. I've heard it all. I mean it all. Nothing. You could not surprise me. You could not. And I hear resentment, and I hear people who won't forgive. I hear people who judge. I do it myself. I hear people who have a different opinion and then won't talk to you because you disagree or I don't like what you said. And whether or not we like Hillary Clinton, she pegs it because Jesus pegs it. She's a good Methodist herself. I'll tell you this, if I ever left the Catholic Church, which I wouldn't, but if I did, I'd become a Methodist. I really respect the Methodists. They dig into social issues, and they really bring the gospel to bear on it, at least all the Methodists I've ever met. And she pegs it. She says, what do we need if we're going to become real neighbors to one another? How are we going to mend this world of war, this world of division, this world where we do everything we can against one another? If we cannot empathize, we can't even hear each other speak. We can't even listen with true interest in a perspective that is not our own. Jesus is begging us to be empathizers. The father comes out and pleads with his older son. Listen, please, your brother has come back to life. You know, if we can't even do it under our own roof in our own homes, and many times we can't, if under our own roof in our own home among blood, we can't forgive, which is why Jesus tells this story about brothers and a father. What hope is there of mending the world? That's why I love this book, all that I've read so far. Diana Butler Bass, in talking about being grounded in the Word of God, grounded in God. If we say we're really Christian, we're believers, and we want to ground our lives in God, then we got to understand, what does God want? Jesus is telling us right here. We got to forgive. We got to empathize. We got to listen. We got to be willing to celebrate when someone is found who was lost and comes back to life. This is about finding God in the world, in our lives. It's about a true spiritual revolution. And what if we got this smart power and believed it? Just look around. 300 or 400 of us. What if for just a week we practiced this smart power? We listened to anybody who spoke to us, and we were willing, even if we didn't like them, to consider their opinion. I'll end with this, a personal story. This week I was coming out of the pastoral center. I wasn't in my blacks, so theoretically somebody might not know I was a priest, although I suspect this person, even though I've never seen him before, is part of the neighborhood, and oftentimes, these people seem to know everything that's going on in the neighborhood. This guy is totally tattooed, every inch of his head. All over his head, his neck, his cheeks, his forehead, every inch. I don't think I've ever seen this many tattoos in my life. To tell you the truth, it was a little frightening. I wasn't sure what to expect. And he was crossing from the church toward the parking lot over there, and he looked a little unhappy. So I said, hi, how are you? I don't know what came over me, but he's a human being. So I said, hi, how are you? What's going on? And he says, I'm really upset. And I said, well, what happened? I was over at the store, and this man treated me rotten. He's done it before. His father isn't like that. His brother, I think his brother, they're nice to me. But this one, he said he's going to call the police if I didn't hurry and get out of the store. He said, that really ticks me off. I said, boy, I can see why it would. That's creepy. And I said, has it happened before? He says, yeah, it has happened before. He says, I can't stand it. It really bothers me. He was quite angry. So I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I can see why it would upset your day. Yeah. And so he said, well, anyway, thanks a lot. And as he started to walk away, I said to him, I said, you know what? Excuse me? I said, you know what? If I were you, I'd let it go. I'd forgive him. Because if you don't, you're going to feel rotten all day. It's his problem, not yours. He's the one who needs to change, not you. And if I were you, I'd just let it go so you could find some peace right now. He looks at me and says, thanks a lot, guy. Thanks a lot. Walked away. Now, I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but it just happened to be a moment of empathy. I don't know, I just sensed that he was troubled. And regardless of how he looked, or, you can't judge the book by the cover, he was a very decent person. There was a human being who was suffering because he was mistreated. And he was able to recognize it in an instant. And he responded to somebody who cared even for a second. Now that's what it's about. What if we practice this smart power all this week? Even once! 400 people leaving this church at one time, touching another person this week with smart power, with empathy, truly listening to them, even if they were somebody with whom we couldn't agree on most things. A moment of empathy. That is a spiritual revolution, and that is God changing our world.